Of all games that have released over the past 20 years, Shadow of the Colossus has to be one of the most influential and arguably one of the best games, not just for the quality of everything that it accomplishes, but also as an example of it being a piece of art, something that people can look at and understand on an emotional level, through its gameplay, open world exploration, the story itself, and the various themes that pop up as you're going and slaying 16 great colossi in this barren, lost world. Shadow of the Colossus is a game that I had the pleasure of playing for the first time a few years ago, and when this game originally released by Team Ico back in 2005 on the PlayStation 2, a lot of people genuinely loved the game when it came out for all sorts of reasons. This video here today is taking a look from a newcomer's perspective, somebody who played the original Shadow of the Colossus only about 3 years ago at the time of this video's filming for the first time. I didn't grow up with it, but there's a lot that I want to say about this game that is considered to be one of the greatest of all time. So, with that having big shoes to fill, much like the Colossi themselves, is this a game that I can safely recommend to all of you guys? Does this legendary classic still hold up? Let's find out. That I can say about Shadow of the Colossus right off the bat, despite the fact that this video isn't going over the PS4 remake, is that the PS2 original looks absolutely fantastic. Every inch of this game just oozes quality, and the time and precision that Team Ico put into constructing this barren, lost world, where no other real life exists except for the Colossi, your horse, and of course you, the player character. Every single piece of this game just oozes personality, despite the fact that this world really doesn't have many living things in it. The forests, the cliff sides, the ocean, the barren landscapes and deserts that you visit, each one of these environments that you visit in this big continent that's been abandoned by time, just pops in every single way imaginable. The color palettes, the weather effects for each area that you go into. The game visually in this way for the environments looks great, despite, again, the lack of life, which is the entire point of the theming of the game. The Colossi designs themselves from a gameplay and narrative perspective look great. Pretty much every Colossi is uniquely designed, located in their own zone or little hub in this forgotten land. And quite frankly, I don't have any issues when it comes to their designs as well. The animation looks great, the designs. This game, from a visual perspective, is fantastic. And not only does it look good for a PS2 game in every way you can think of, but the fact of the matter remains that the simplicity of you and the Colossi battling it out, being the only real form of any other living person there, also speaks toward the game's messages within the story, if you're willing to look that far. Trying to say in a long-winded fashion is that Shadow of the Colossus on the PS2 looks great, and the soundtrack also follows that up as well, but in a different way. I say that Shadow of the Colossus soundtrack is good, I don't mean it in the traditional sense that I've described other games at in the past. This soundtrack here isn't anything that's over the top. There's no major orchestral pieces, there's no major ambiance pieces or anything along those lines that you would expect from an epic action game, an RPG, or something like that. While Shadow of the Colossus does contain some epic tracks that get you pumped up to take out the Colossi, it also has very emotional pieces that make you realize the weight of what you've done in the context of the story, slaying these peaceful beasts. There's also a calm melodic music that plays as you're traveling by yourself on your horse aggro throughout the course of the game, traveling through this hidden, forbidden land. The soundtrack in this game is definitely more ambiance based. It has some cool tracks here and there when fighting the Colossi, and for a lot of the emotional moments in the cutscenes. The soundtrack is not only good for the music, but it's also good in the definition, again, in the context of the game's setting and the story. The setting is you're going through, traveling throughout this forbidden land by yourself on a mission to slay these 16 colossi that are seemingly innocent. They haven't done anything wrong to you, and there's nobody else that lives here. It emulates a lot of emotions that people, when you start to play the game, realize a lot more. Loneliness, devastation, sorrow, joy at one point when you're about ready to slay these beasts. But at the end of the day, you also feel the weight of this journey, wondering if it's even worth it in the first place. The soundtrack works in a lot of ways possible, and I can only do so much to describe how good it actually is, unless you play it for yourself. The story of Shadow of the Colossus is a very simple and straightforward one. Your player character, on your mighty horse aggro, travels to a forbidden land sealed away by his tribe many years before, a land, of course, that he is forbidden to enter. He brings with him a female companion. The game does not establish if it's his sister, childhood friend, or anyone else connected to him for that matter. All you know is that he's bringing this girl to this forbidden land that he's not allowed to enter. He brings her inside a temple and lays her on an altar. A dark being, later revealed to be Dorman, as its name, reveals that yes, you can resurrect this person if you want, but in order for you to do so, you have to slay 16 giant colossi throughout this abandoned land, where again, no other life is located at. Once you destroy all 16 of the colossi, there may be a chance to bring her back. Of course, your hero sets off on this journey in order to slay the colossi and bring back whoever his female companion is. But the dark being Dorman warns him, in doing so, not only do you have the potential to release some kind of chaotic evil, but you yourself will become more corrupted as time goes on. You yourself will be consumed by darkness and possibly transform yourself evil forever. Your character, of course, doesn't care about these consequences, only caring about bringing your female companion back. So, they set off on their journey. And in doing so, this sets the stage for a story that is simple on purpose. Team Ico deliberately chose this premise, focusing on the experience, the world building, and the actual gameplay, rather than fleshing out an in-depth story that you would normally see in something like a massive RPG. This game is supposed to convey all sorts of emotions for the simple premise that does play out throughout the rest of the game, both at the beginning and toward the end. A lot of things that are left up to player interpretation in terms of the lore. Why was Dorman sealed inside the tower? Why was this forbidden land sealed off in the first place? Is this being even truly evil, given the fact that they warn you ahead of time? Yeah, there's some hidden consequences here to what you're doing in bringing this girl back. But at the end of the day, these questions are left to be answered by the player. You're given this simple premise and a reason to travel through the land and slay the colossi in the first place. I like this story premise a lot. This is a story that isn't going to be anything big or flashy for those of you who are used to playing your in-depth RPGs or your action hack-and-slash games. This is a game that is built up on a lot of lore, and it's a very simple premise, but it works in the context of the game and for the exploration. The story, I think, is really good, and it works very well for the type of game Shadow of the Colossus is trying to be. I caution you, if you've never played for the first time, if you're expecting some over-the-top, in-depth story that comes down to epic boss battles, like in an RPG sense, you're not going to find that with this one. But this game's story is very good, and you really should play it and look it up for yourself. Your gameplay mainly consists of you traveling to all these different areas and finding these 16 colossi located throughout the game. Riding your horse aggro and using a shining sword that you use in game to pinpoint the direction of each of these locations, you are traveling on foot or on horseback throughout various different terrains in order to locate the colossi and slay them to bring back, again, your companion. The gameplay mainly consists of you traveling on horseback through mountains, deserts, waterfalls, in an attempt to locate the colossi. That's one half of the gameplay. It's basically a horse simulator, or travel simulator if you want to call it that, which is again the point. You have to manage the controls and movement of aggro as well as your player character. Once you locate the colossi, the game suddenly becomes more of a platformer. You have to scale each one of these colossi in a puzzle-like fashion, whether using the terrain or the colossi's body, in order to traverse to and identify their weak points, and then plunge your sword multiple times into the weak spot until you eventually bring down the colossi in a cinematic cutscene. That's the entirety of the game at this point, and I really do like a lot of things about the gameplay. And for that reason, I like the gameplay. That platforming is very fun to figure out, climbing up the bodies of each one of the colossi, utilizing your controls and your vitality meter, balancing out when to take a break, but also knowing not to get shaken off, otherwise you'll either die or have to start over again. Jumping on platforms, grabbing onto the fur or hair of the colossi, identifying the weak points using the light beam of your sword, and then building up enough stamina or vitality to plunge your sword in for varying strikes that deal a different amount of damage depending on how hard you push down on the button on the controller. Quite frankly, I think this puzzle-solving, platforming combat works very well for each one of the colossi encounters. Whether you're hanging onto a colossi flying through the air, a colossi trying to shake you off and stomp on you, or traveling through the water and avoiding getting hit by one of these colossi, which does happen in a few different boss fights. The point is, no matter the terrain, the puzzle-solving, platforming, or anything, the actual combat worked extremely well for the colossi fights. What I described earlier about you riding on aggro working well for the aesthetic of the game, I really do enjoy the exploration and traversal as well in terms of the gameplay. Works well in the context of the story, works in the context of traveling through the Forbidden Land. The only thing about the gameplay in Shadow of the Colossus that I personally didn't care for too much are the horseback riding controls on aggro. Aggro is controlled through a number of button prompts, as well as using your dual twin sticks on the PS2 controller, since we're talking about the original port here. Aggro works well in different ways, whether using your bow or sword in order to strike the Colossi as weak points. But there are several Colossi boss fights where you have to use aggro in order to strike the enemy from the ground when they're up in the air, or using aggro as a stepping stool in order to grab onto the Colossi. I like a lot of the Colossi fights where you don't need to rely on aggro, because the controls are way too stiff, floaty, and quite frankly, I'm just not a huge fan of aggro's movement or control and the reliance in certain boss fights. I understand that that's the entire point of the game too. Team made it difficult in order to control aggro to actually use throughout the gameplay. But the fact of the matter remains though too, is that I wish the controls would have been a little more fine-tuned despite being purposefully made awkward to use for the boss fights. But all that being said though, from the platforming to the boss fights to everything else gameplay-wise, this game also hits the nail right on the head. It's a fantastic time, except for those dang horse controls. Being said, guys, that wraps up my thoughts on Shadow of the Colossus. This review is structured a little bit differently because Shadow of the Colossus is a game that isn't a traditional or typical video game. This is one structured for the journey, for the gameplay, the world building, and the very loose plot and lore that we have here with everything that it sets out to accomplish. And thus, I have to review it accordingly, not just as a video game, but as an art form, as a piece of art, as it's considered by a lot of people. And I can wholeheartedly agree. Shadow of the Colossus is a very good game, and it's absolutely a classic in video gaming history that I think everyone should experience at least once. The game looks beautiful on the original PS2 with a really great and in-depth world. The music here works very well for the premise of the game. Has some very epic tracks here that just absolutely get you in the mood to keep going through the game. The story has a very simple premise that has a lot of lore and explanation that once again works well in context of the game. And the gameplay, whether you're fighting the Colossi or traveling through the Forbidden Land, also is very fun to do. Although I will say, again, the horse controls, not a huge fan of controlling aggro in this game. I will say, it led to a lot of frustrating moments But again, I know that's the point. With all that being said, with few minor grievances in this game, this is a really good game and a piece of art that everyone should at least experience once if you are a fan of video games. Shadow of the Colossus, whether you're playing the original PS2 version or the remake, absolutely fantastic game. Definitely check this one out. And that's going to wrap it up for this review of Shadow of the Colossus on the PS2, guys. Let me know what you guys think about the game in the comment section down below. Did you really enjoy it? Do you guys have a lot of fun, nostalgic memories of playing it for the first time? Do you want to play it if you haven't experienced it yet? Let me know what you guys think about the game down below. This game's a classic, considered to be one of the best of all time, so I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to have your own personal stories or experiences with it. I would love to hear them. Otherwise, give this video a like if you did enjoy. It does help out the channel. And subscribe if you guys want to keep up with future game reviews and all sorts of other videos that we do here on Gaming Nostalgia. That being said, guys, this has been Ryan from the Nostalgia Factor saying, keep on gaming.